Entering a secluded restaurant in New Orleans, Ryan Gosling was anticipating a bland meal. However, his expectations were shattered when he heard a haunting, raw voice that he couldn't help but listen to. In that instant, everything changed. Something about the girl, the song, and the night itself felt different, too real, too personal. Little does Ryan know that this night won't be just another quiet escape, but rather, it will drag him into a story he never saw coming. Before we continue, please let us know where you are watching from and if you enjoy stories like these. A film event had brought Ryan Gosling to Louisiana, so he walked slowly through the French Quarter, his head slightly lowered beneath a baseball cap, a familiar shield against the world's gaze. Tomorrow, we have another special story for you, so subscribe to the channel. The warm night air carried the scent of spices, freshly baked bread, and the unmistakable hum of jazz drifting from the dimly lit bars. The city was alive with music and mystery, a tapestry woven with stories hidden in its cobblestone alleys. However, the red carpets had never captivated him quite like these moments of solitude, where he could quietly watch the world go by. Tonight, he wasn't seeking anything extravagant, just a simple dinner in a place where no one would notice him. And so, he discovered it, a little hidden restaurant with no bright signs, no lines outside the door, just warm lights streaming in through the windows, and the faint sound of silverware clinking against plates. It was the type of spot that only the locals knew about. The atmosphere inside was rustic and cozy, wooden tables that had seen better days, shelves adorned with dusty wine bottles, and soft, flickering candlelight that cast a golden glow throughout the room, created an ambience ripe for romance. The aroma of slow-cooked Creole food wafted through the air. Ryan settled into a corner table away from the entrance, the location offering a discreet view of the room. A middle-aged waiter greeted him with a knowing smile and a menu, a hint of perfect familiarity in his eyes. With a desire to immerse himself in the rhythm of the night while he waited for his food, Ryan made his order. The restaurant was filled with couples whispering to each other, friends laughing over shared plates, and a woman scribbling furiously in a worn notebook. Ryan felt his mind finally settle as he let his eyes wander. Suddenly, a whisper of anticipation echoed through the room, and he lifted his head to look into the distance. A small stage, consisting of a stool, a microphone, and an electric guitar, had been set up in the far corner of the restaurant. While an elderly speaker was briefly addressing the patrons, a girl, who looked no older than 13, stood tall and steady, her hands firmly gripping the microphone. Her expression betrayed an otherworldly quality. She closed her eyes and furrowed her brows, as if she were guarding a profound secret. As she began to sing, Ryan felt his breath catch in his throat. Her voice had a rawness and weight that belied its childish age. Every note conveyed a story and emotion too profound for the young singer to seemingly comprehend. Ryan felt a chill go down his spine as he listened to her voice, soaring through the air with haunting power. He had heard incredible singers before, but this was different. She held the microphone tightly, as if it were her only weapon against falling apart. There was no nervousness, no hesitation, just pure, unfiltered emotion. That was the sound that lingered after the forks were set down. The song ended. For a brief moment, the room fell silent. Then, out of nowhere, applause erupted, beginning timidly but soon growing louder and stronger, emanating genuine admiration. The girl, Elara, drew back from the stage, smiled shyly and stepped down, delicately navigating the tables with a little donation box in her hands. Ryan felt something stir inside him. He heard the voice, the pain in her melody, pleading. But why? As Ryan couldn't shake the sensation, the restaurant went back to its usual rhythm, with conversations picking up again and the sound of silverware clinking against plates. His thoughts stayed on the girl, wondering who she was and why her voice carried such sorrow. He observed her as she gracefully moved from table to table, accepting crumpled bills and loose change in her small donation box, without showing any arrogance. Ryan approached the waiter and asked in a low voice, "Who is she?" The waiter looked over at the girl and sighed. "That's Elara. She sings here most nights." Ryan studied her again. She seemed too young to be working so hard, but she carried herself with an air of quiet determination, as if she had no choice but to grow up too soon. Ryan asked, a note of concern in his voice, "Does she get paid?" The waiter shook his head. "She sings for donations." Ryan frowned. The waiter hesitated, then leaned in just a little. "She's been coming here for months. Although some of the regulars give what they can, it's never enough." Ryan felt a pang in his chest. "She does this every night?" "Her grandfather, Marcus," the waiter continued, "was once a famous craftsman who restored many of the town's old buildings. Now he's sick and needs surgery, but he refuses to accept charity." Ryan's grip on his glass tightened. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Elara wasn't merely a talented singer. She was a young girl battling an oppressive destiny, burdened by a weight too great for her frail frame to bear. Her grandfather, meanwhile, was a man mired in pride and powerlessness. Ryan, looking down at the wine in his glass, let out a long, contemplative exhale. He had experienced the anguish of wanting to aid a loved one, but being unable to alter their destiny. He couldn't simply walk away from this now. While Elara carried on across the restaurant, she was gathering donations. Some people generously pressed folded bills into her hands with sympathetic smiles. Others hardly glanced at her, dropping spare change into the box silently. Regardless, she accepted it all with quiet sincerity, thanking each person with just that. As she approached Ryan's table, she paused. He could see the weariness in her brilliant, intelligent eyes. She didn't recognize him right away, seeing only another stranger in a city full of faces. Rather than making a show of it, Ryan discreetly slipped a $100 bill into the box, offering a gentle smile as if it were a simple tip. Elara's eyes widened in surprise. She blinked before quietly thanking him. Her voice had changed. It was now soft and fragile, nothing like the powerful force that had filled the room moments ago. Ryan hesitated for a moment, then asked gently, "How is your grandfather?" Elara blinked again, surprised. Most people didn't ask, they just gave money and moved on. She bit her lip and gripped the donation box a little tighter. She spoke slowly, but Ryan caught on to her worries. She was scared that her singing, raising her voice night after night, wouldn't be enough. Ryan nodded, a deep understanding in his eyes. He did understand. He watched the girl leave, something in her voice reminding him of a pain he had once carried. But he knew this story wasn't over yet. Elara walked through the restaurant with an obvious burden on her small shoulders. She was young, but she carried herself with the quiet resilience of someone who had learned to fight battles too soon. His fingers traced the rim of his wineglass as he replayed her performance in his mind. Her voice seemed to plead with the world, cracking slightly in places not out of weakness, but because she felt every word she sang. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that this wasn't just about the money. Elara wasn't just collecting donations. She wasn't just performing. She was trying to hold on to something before time ran out. The following morning, Ryan found himself in front of a dilapidated apartment building on the outskirts of New Orleans. The building wasn't run down, but it bore the marks of its storied past: weathered walls, rusted balcony railings, and stories of people who once lived there. Elara had mentioned apartment 3B. Ryan adjusted the strap of his canvas bag and climbed the stairs. In his mind, he pictured a proud and stubborn man who had built his life on his own, only to find that his hands were failing him. As he knocked, the door creaked open. Marcus stood there, thin but with an underlying strength, his hair slightly hunched, framing a face lined with time. His sharp eyes studied Ryan with suspicion. Ryan offered a disarming, gentle smile. "Greetings, I'm Ryan. I heard about your restoration work and wanted to meet you." Marcus scowled. "My work?" Ryan nodded. "Restoration is an art form," he said, his voice calm. Marcus rubbed his chin. There was a long pause, and then, reluctantly, he stepped aside. The apartment was small but tidy, with wooden furniture, faded photos, and hand-carved trinkets. Ryan glanced over at the workbench in the corner, which was filled with unfinished wooden pieces. Marcus was still making coffee and asked with a rough tone, essentially what Ryan was doing there. Ryan grinned faintly. "I met Elara last night." Marcus's face hardened. He whispered something about how Elara shouldn't be singing in restaurants. Ryan leaned forward slightly, his tone earnest. "She's only doing it because she loves you." Marcus scoffed, taking a sip of coffee as he sighed. "Elara believes that she can fix things, fight the inevitable, but I refuse to let her waste her life attempting to save me." Ryan chose his words with deliberate care. "You taught her to be strong." Marcus looked up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "But strength isn't just about fighting alone," Ryan continued, his gaze steady. "Sometimes it's about knowing when to let people fight with you." Marcus stated firmly, "I don't take handouts." With a thoughtful smile, Ryan reached into his canvas bag and placed a small, intricately carved wooden box on the table. Marcus frowned. "What is this?" Ryan answered, a hint of understated earnestness in his tone. "Something I found in an antique store. It reminded me of your work." As Marcus gently traced his fingers over the intricate carvings and smooth, aged wood, Ryan noticed a change in his expression. "You're an artist," Ryan whispered, "and the world still needs artists." Marcus looked up, his eyes weary but not defeated. For the first time in a long time, his hands didn't feel weak. Instead, they felt as though they still had something to create. Leaving Marcus's apartment, Ryan carried with him a new idea and the image of the old man's unwavering pride. Marcus would never accept charity, but for a fleeting moment, Ryan had felt a spark of hope. This wasn't about handing Marcus anything. It was about rebuilding what he had already created. In New Orleans, Ryan found the correct contact and dialed the number. He smiled slightly. "I have a proposition for you." 2 days later, Ryan found himself inside the historic Orpheum Theater, one of the city's oldest venues. Tonight, it had hosted legendary performers. On that fateful night, Ryan met Elara outside the restaurant where she sang. When she approached, she said, "I'm surprised to see you again." "I have a question," Ryan said, getting straight to the point yet gently. "I can get this place filled immediately." He gestured towards the Orpheum Theater. The theater owner had agreed, but Ryan knew Elara might be reluctant, especially thinking of Marcus. But what if it wasn't a gift, he mused? What if it was a recognition of her talent? Elara frowned and looked down at the donation box she carried nightly. "I don't know," she said, her eyes wandering to the box. "I'm not a real performer. I just do this because I have to." Ryan shook his head, his expression kind. "Number one, you do it because it's in you." Elara bit her lip, remembering how she used to sing for fun, but now she just did it for the money. Ryan took out a ticket for the following night and gave it to her. Elara studied it, bewildered. Ryan grinned. "I think you'll find something there you didn't expect." The following morning, Ryan returned to Marcus's apartment. The old man continued to mutter, "I don't give up that easily." Ryan placed a piece of wood on the table. Marcus scowled in confusion. "A commission?" Ryan explained that a theater downtown, the Orpheum, needed someone to restore its original woodwork, and that they needed real craftsmanship. "And you thought of me?" Marcus scoffed, though a new light entered his eyes. Ryan shrugged, a subtle smile playing on his lips. "Your reputation speaks for itself." As Marcus ran his fingers over the wood, Ryan noticed a change in the expression on the old man's face. He then suggested that Marcus come see the place, and the old man finally agreed. Step one was complete. That night, as Ryan stood backstage, he watched as the Orpheum Theater filled with strangers, locals, and musicians. They weren't there for just any show, though. They had heard rumors about a girl with a voice that could stop time. Elara arrived with Marcus, her eyes widening as she took in the grandeur of the theater. Marcus ran a hand over the wooden frames of a doorway, muttering something about someone needing to restore them properly. Ryan crossed his arms, a slight, knowing look on his face. "Yeah, and they need someone to keep it maintained." Marcus looked at him seriously, as if considering the implications. As the theater owner approached, Elara, who was still staring at the stage, nodded confusedly. He smiled and said, "We'd love to hear you sing tonight, Elara." He gestured towards the stage. Her eyes widened. As the lights dimmed and the audience hushed, Elara stepped toward the microphone, her heart pounding and her hands shaking. She had never been more terrified, but for the first time in a long time, she had never felt more alive. With her hands trembling and the lights blinding, she stepped up onto the grand stage of the Orpheum Theater. The crowd had come for her. "I can't do this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ryan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "This isn't about money," he whispered back. "What is it about?" The intensity of the audience made Elara feel unprepared. She had always sung to keep her grandfather alive, but this was different. With a look of panic in her eyes, she whispered to Ryan, "I can't do this." Ryan knelt down beside her and spoke in a soothing, steady voice, assuring her that she didn't have to. But he also warned gently, "If you don't, you might always wonder, what if?" Elara's breath caught. The theater fell silent. Ryan moved to the grand piano, his fingers pressing into the keys, playing a melody that felt like home, a quiet anchor in the sea of faces. Elara closed her eyes and breathed deeply. Then she began to sing. Her voice started tentatively, but as she surrendered to the music, it became stronger, full of all the emotions she had repressed for years. The audience leaned in, enthralled. This wasn't a performance. It was her truth, raw and undeniable. As the final note faded, a profound silence descended upon the room, followed by a resounding applause that seemed to shake the very foundations of the old theater. Elara stood motionless, gazing at the cheering crowd. Their applause wasn't a sign of sympathy or pity. They had heard her, truly heard her. It was a first. Marcus watched, his hands quivering, not from illness, but from emotion. He had kept Elara at arm's length, thinking he was protecting her. But in reality, she hadn't been burdened. She had been becoming. With tears in her eyes, Elara met his gaze from the stage and whispered, almost imperceptibly, yet he understood. "I'll do the surgery." Later, she hugged him tightly, finally able to breathe after fighting for so long. The theater owner stepped onto the stage, smiling. "Thanks to the generosity of this incredible community," he announced, referring to donations and ticket proceeds. "Marcus's surgery will be fully covered." As the crowd went wild, celebrating, Elara was still trying to make sense of it all. This wasn't just about rescuing her grandfather. It was about transforming her life. Ryan felt the electricity in the air, a quiet satisfaction in his heart. He knew that something profound had transpired that night. Sometimes the most monumental moments in life aren't merely about surviving. They're about becoming the person you were destined to be.